Dr. Bethel,
Yes.
there is a blue sign on my computer that says start webinar. Is that what you're saying to click on so people can join?
Yes, just adjusting YouTube.
Dr. Bethel, there is a blue sign on my computer that says start webinar.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying to click on so people can join?
Mm-hmm. Yes, just adjusting YouTube.
It's a blue sign on my computer that says start webinar.
I can bring it now. I was using it. What's that? Yeah, try to do it.
All right.
Hello, Beta.
Yes. Hi,
Today, sorry, I was preaching and using my laptop, so I'm bringing it down for mommy to use.
Okay.
Hi. Okay.
All right. Okay. I hope it works out that way. Well, thank you all for joining us. We had a few technical glitches. It's 6:04 p.m. GMT. And so we're going to wait for a few minutes and allow people to join, and then I will start with introductions, and we will start. I'm going to post the YouTube link so that people can start sharing if needed. All right. All right, well, thank you all for joining us today. My name is Dr. Bertha Ai. I'm the chairman of the Wesley Girls High School Webinar Committee, and on behalf of the Old Girls Association of Wesley Girls High School, I want to welcome you all to the first of a series of webinars over the next 3 weeks covering the topics, the dynamics of unhealthy relationships. We're going to be looking at the red flags of unhealthy relationships. We will be looking at how to get help when someone is in an unhealthy relationship. And finally, how to heal and what support systems are needed after somebody has been through a traumatic and unhealthy relationship. And the genesis for this topic really is based on the fact that over the last few years in the media, and also in people's personal lives, we have noticed an increase in the incidence of unhealthy relationships with some really damaging consequences. And one of our school mottos is right every wrong. Our motto is speak true, live pure, speak true, right wrong, and follow the king. And so we found it necessary to right this wrong in society. And we looked throughout the globe and picked up about 8 wonderful specialists who would be addressing this topic. We have our own Reverend, the very Reverend Ama Afoble, who would be joining us and is on the panel. We have Mr. Adolphe Awuku Bekwing, who would be speaking. Unfortunately, he's located in Ghana and just had a power cut, and so he will be joining us by WhatsApp or whatever means necessary. He was supposed to go first, but he might have to go last at the moment. And we also have with us Dr. Foster Naniwato, who is a psychologist. We have Dr. Angie Dramana Abwaje, who would not be speaking today, but will be available to answer questions. Honorable Dinah Dapa, the Deputy Minister in the Ministry of Justice and Defense. Dr. Jifa Atta, an old girl, as well as Professor Ifwa Hesse, the outgoing Old Girls Association President and Class of '69, as well as Professor Angela Oforiata, an old girl as well. And moderating this webinar with me would be our own Mrs. Samantha Prozier. She's class of 1983. She's the Old Girls Association President in the United Kingdom. And so what's going to happen today, or originally supposed to happen today, what was originally supposed to happen today was that Mr. Awuku Bekwing was going to go first, and then Reverend Ama Afoble was going to go next, and then Dr. Naniwato was supposed to go last. But we may have to make a few changes. Reverend Ama Afoble is, I believe, switching computers at this time. And so we may have to let her go second, and Dr. Naniwato would go first, and I think Mr. Awuku Bekwing would join us. Now, we're going to use whatever means to try and get hold of him, even if it means joining by WhatsApp and having him speak, because we did a rehearsal yesterday. And so we'll see how best we can work through this. And a few ground rules: if you have any questions, please raise your hand, or you can type a question in the Q&A box or put it in the chat room. Each speaker is going to be speaking for 15 minutes, followed by 5 minutes of question and answer session. And so ideally we should be done in an hour, and the next hour will be strictly answering all your questions. We'll give you a summary at the end, and we'll see you all next week. And so for now, I'm going to introduce Dr. Naniwato. And before I do that, I want my co-moderator to say hello.
Right. Hi, everybody. Yes, nicely introduced. Thank you very much, Dr. Bertha. My name is Samantha Prosser, and as she said, I am the president for the Wesley Girls, All Girls Association in UK and Ireland. And I am also a member of the webinar committee. And I'm delighted to be a part of this, and we're really looking forward to this afternoon. Thank you.
All right, wonderful, wonderful. And so I am going to introduce Dr. Naniwato. So Dr. Foster Naniwato, thank you for joining us. He's a senior police officer and a mental health practitioner with the Ghana Police Service. He has over 12 years of clinical experience. He acquired his undergraduate and master's degrees from the University of Ghana, where he specialized in psychology and clinical psychology, respectively. He holds a doctorate degree in clinical psychology from University of Central Nicaragua. Since 2012, he has worked as a consulting clinical psychologist at the Ghana Police Hospital, where he conducts psychological assessment and treatment of various psychological disorders, including depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, and alcohol use disorders among police officers, their families, and other civilians. He has also conducted several training sessions on mental health issues for police officers and members of the general public. Dr. Naniwato has conducted peacekeeping pre-deployment, deployment, and post-deployment psychological assessment among police officers in various peacekeeping missions across the globe. He has also conducted pre-deployment training on coping with stress in peacekeeping, peace support operation environments for multiple of peacekeeping contingents. He is the head of Clinical Psychology Unit, Social Services Department, and Mini Crisis Response Center of the Police Hospital. Over the past 8 years, he has served as a key professional support for the Domestic Violence and Victim Support Units, also known as DOVSU, within Greater Accra Region and Kaswa Police jurisdictions. He has conducted psychological assessments and provided interventions for persons who have experienced various forms of abuse and assault in a variety of domestic violence cases. He also has provided assessments of couples and families and provided couples therapy and counseling services for many DOVSU cases. His research areas include adolescents and police suicide, mental health issues among police officers, adolescents, and commercial sex workers. He is married with 4 children and has a passion in farming. So this is a very, very busy and well-accomplished individual. So without much ado, please help me welcome Dr. Foster Naniwato. And please remember that this is streaming on YouTube Live, and look at the link. And if you can share with your friends, that would be useful. So welcome, Dr. Foster. You may share your slides, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. And
Dr. Foster, it looks like we can't hear you very well. Let me try and see what I can do to. Did we lose him?
Okay.
Oh, he's muted.
No, he's back now. Yeah.
Yeah. Hello, Dr. Foster.
yes, please. Good evening from Ghana. And can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. So even though my presentation was supposed to be the third one for the day, but as a result of technical challenges, yes, I'll be starting. So I am going to speak about dating violence and emotional abuse and blackmail in relationships. All right. When we talk about dating or relationship violence, it's just simply a pattern of coercive and abusive tactics that are employed by one person in a relationship in order to gain power and control over the other person. Largely or most of the time, it's in romantic relationships or relationships that involve sexual intimacy. One individual would like to gain power and control over the other person, and therefore they engage in certain tactics, and this can include physical violence, verbal abuse, coercion, threats, intimidation, isolation, emotional, sexual, or economic abuse of their partner. And they do all this just to gain control and power and take absolute charge of their partner so that they can feel good about it, whilst the partner just have to suffer in there. There are a lot of signs that, or a lot of things that can show that this person is emotionally or physically or abusing you, or you are experiencing violence in your relationship. These can include excessive jealousy from the partner, in which the person will try to prohibit you or limit you from getting in touch with other people, and they are consistently very suspicious about your relationship, important relationships with other people. It could be a work colleague, your boss at the workplace, your partner can be excessively jealous and they begin to accuse you of flirting or cheating with that person. They also try to control you in terms of where you go, what you wear to where you go, what you do. A lot of the time, they also attempt to isolate you from your loved ones. In this regard, they don't want you to go out. They don't want your loved ones or relatives to visit you. They want you to just be, they want to be the only person in your life that you interact with. Anytime there's a third party or you try to be nice to another person, they would definitely not be happy with it. And so they will try to limit all your access to these. Additionally, as well, and coercion as a form of manipulation in sexual activity. In terms of sexual activity, either they would deny you, or when you are not in that position of consenting to sexual activity, they take advantage of you anyway. And they can make you to do or perform certain sexual activities that you usually would not like to do. They will force you to do it. Then that's a big sign that you're going through an abuse. The person can put you down and also degrade you. They will dismiss your accomplishments. For instance, you achieve a higher degree, and then they still just tell you, oh, but you're still my wife, and therefore you still have to just listen to me. Everybody's achieving that. So if you achieve it as well, what does it mean? I do remember one of my clients getting a law degree, and in actual fact, how difficult it is entering into a law school in Ghana, and in actual fact, passing the exam, entering a professional level, and their husband just said, but you're still a wife material. I will decide whether you will even use that qualification afterwards or not. So the person, even if you achieve a lot, they just don't see it as anything. They will degrade you, and they will also display frequent mood swings in which they will, one moment they are loving you, the other moment they are exploding. One moment, when you're in public situation, they can be so loving and so much sweet, but within the private setting, they can be so much cruel to you. This is a big sign of an abuse. It's also important to take note of threats of any kind. It could be physical, breaking things, banging the door, pushing off certain things just to make a point to you that the threat they give you, they would carry it out. They want to get your attention with those physical threats. They can actually get into the point of restraining you from going anywhere at all, and they can lock you in a room for hours. That is a big sign. If there is indication that the person has hit a former partner or partner in the past, that is an indication that that person is likely an abuser. If they have hit you before, it's a sign that they can be an abuser. Therefore, these are things that we have to take note of. Economically as well, they want to take charge of your work. They either want to restrain you from working, or they want to control your means of income. So even if you earn some money from any work, you have to hand it over to them. They determine how you spend it. They determine how much they give you as well. So economically, they can limit you to that point. Your paycheck, your access to a car, you have to ask permission from them. That is a big sign. Also, they can have quick temper, in which every very little thing that you do, the next moment they are off, out and about, and they are exploding and exhibiting all kinds of negative behaviors towards you. You need to watch out for that. They do not allow you, or they want you to, they don't want to end the relationship, and then they make you feel guilty for leaving the relationship. That is a warning sign that the person is abusing you. Now, moving to the aspect of blackmail, which is just described as manipulative styles where someone will use your feelings as a way to control your behavior, to persuade you to do things or behave in the way that they want. So the person is likely going to use your feelings, manipulate them in a way so that they can get you to do the things they want to. When people in your life use fear, obligation, and guilt to manipulate you, it means that they are engaging in what? Psychological or emotional blackmail. It can involve trying to get what they want from you, but instead of, let's say they have a secret of you, instead of holding that for you, they use it to manipulate you. If you don't do this for me, they put you in constant threats and intimidation. They don't make you feel fine about yourself. All these can be signs of emotional abuse. A researcher called Susan Forward identified some 6 stages in which emotional abuse can happen. First of all, the person who is an abuser will make a demand on you. So for instance, I want you to stop seeing this friend of yours. I don't want your family member to come and visit us any longer. I don't want you to work anymore. So there's a demand on you. That demand, they expect you to what? Obey. And they can give you reasons like, oh, I don't think those people are good for you. I want the best for this relationship. That is why I am putting this demand on you. So they make you feel like their demand is legitimate, but then possibly because these are things that you are used to doing in the past, when these demands are placed on you, there's a likelihood that you will resist. And when you do not agree with them, it is likely that they'll push back and then put additional more pressure on you. The pressure can be in the form of repeating their demand. I want you to stop this interaction with your friend. I want you to stop going out with your friend. I don't want your family members to come here any longer. They repeat it over and over again. And in all these, they can say, I'm only thinking about our future. If you really love me, then you do this for me. So they make, as they put this demand on you, over a period, they are also repeating and putting the pressure, extending their pressure if you resist. And if you do not bow to their pressure, then they begin to put either direct or indirect threats in. If you go to where you go out with your friends tonight, I won't be here when you come back. That can be a threat they will make directly to you. If you go there or if you do this, when you come back, you won't find me with the kids. Indirect threat could be that if you can't stay with me tonight when I need you, maybe someone else. So even though they've not told you that they are going to find someone else to cheat on with you, they are likely going to just give you an indirect threat that someone else will do. And so these threats are supposed to put additional pressure on you to bow down to the demands. When these insistent threats and pressures build up, there's a possibility that you may just want to carry good whatever they are asking of you, because you do not want them to carry out the threats that they are giving you. Therefore, you may just bow down. Sometimes the insistent demands may cause you to feel like your resistance is not justifiable. And then once you give in by allowing them to and carrying out what they are demanding of you, it becomes a way that they will use against you a lot of the time. When this happens, once you give in, all of a sudden they can just become all loving, all kind, expressing a lot of love and care for you, at least for the moment. As you bow to this, it means that in the future, they would definitely take advantage of it and then repeat the cycle over and over again. So a cycle starts. First of all, the pressure will begin. There is a tension building up over a period to even a point where if you don't comply, they may carry out their threats. If you don't, if you do carry out their demand, or you obey their demand, it means that they will become all loving again, but just for a short time, and then everything will start all over again. Now we have examples of blackmailers. The first group we call punishers. For these people, they always will use punishment tactics to get you to do what they want. So they use punishment tactics. They will say what they want you to do, and they will tell you what will happen if you don't comply with them. I will make sure I don't give you feeding money if you don't do what I want you to do. I don't want you to go out with your friends, but you do. Or I don't want you to start going to school again. If you do, then you know that you are on yourself. So you are on your own. So they put punishment as a consequence. But many times as well, these form of punishers can also use silent treatment, aggressive tactics such as banging the door, or anger expressions to make you to do what, or comply with what they are demanding of you. Additionally, we also have the self-punishers. So for this type of people, when they put a demand on you and you are not able to meet their demand, or you resist, they are likely going to use blackmail tactics in which they infringe some, or they threaten to infringe some form of pain or discomfort onto themselves, so that they make you feel responsible for their behavior. So instead of threatening you, they would rather explain how they would hurt themselves, or if you don't participate in what they're asking for, how it will help them. So the threat can go like, I can harm myself, or I will kill myself if you go out, or if you want to break up with me, I will not agree with you, so I will just end my life. People using the self-punishment tactics may spin the situation to make it seem as if their difficulties are your fault. They do it in such a way that you can actually feel so much guilty and responsible for what they go through. They are also the category of sufferers as well. And often what they do is that they may not show anything in particular, but they will use their feelings to convey their demands. They can indicate to you that as a result of not giving them or allowing them to use your car, they were beaten by the rain, they were late for work, as a result of the fact that they do not have any means of income, any means of transport. So they put this to you in a way, it makes you feel bad, and they make you feel like they are suffering because of you. So they can show signs of sadness and rejection. They can frown, they use sighs and mopping and pain and discomfort as the way to show that they are suffering because you are not providing or meeting the demands that they are putting on you. Finally, we also have the tantalizers, who are the people who would use all forms of praise gestures and kind gestures and patronizing to make you feel as though when you meet their demand, then you are the best person ever. So tantalizers, even when you meet their demand, they will hold the rewards that they have promised you earlier on. They will hold it and expect you to do something else or meet other expectation of theirs. So if you meet a point, they will just say, oh, sweetie, I love the way you try, but this is just beyond your understanding. A comment such as that could be passed. And this can get you to become so much worked up because over and over again, you are not able to meet the standards. As you meet the standards, they set new ones for you. And even when they promise affection towards you, they are likely going to withhold it and expect more from you. Emotional blackmail could take the form of emotional neglect and isolation, where they will be demanding respect and many forms of things. They will shut you down, communication system, silent treatment. They won't talk to you, as well as dehumanizing you, making you feel very bad over the period. So far, these are what I have for you, and I wait for questions, and as I think my time is up.
Okay, Dr. Foster, thank you very much for a very insightful presentation. We're really, really thankful. And I'm sure there'll be some questions. The first question was that, will you make the slides available or recording? And so I posted the YouTube link in the chat room so that those who want to go back to it, we may have to edit out the first few minutes when we were just waiting, but the YouTube link is live. And so for those of you who want to go back and look at it, that would be the link. And there's one question here. It says, thank you very much for this insightful presentation. Does the abuser not need help themselves? They seem to me not to be mentally sound, or is it a complex of some sort? And in other words, you know, is the abuser not entitled to a relationship if somehow those are the characteristics that they find themselves exhibiting? And if we can answer that question, Dr. Samantha would then introduce Reverend Afuble.
Yes, many times the abusers themselves need help. There are research evidence to prove that many times the abusers actually acquire some of these characteristics from previous experiences, including what they tend to normalize from relationships of parents, relationships of other people that they vicariously experience. Sometimes they just become insecure, and there is also evidence that many times they may also have mental health challenges, and they are not responsive to the needs, or they do not empathize with their partners, and so for that matter engage in these behaviors. So it is true that these abusers largely have problems themselves, and they will benefit largely from mental health care.
Okay. Thank you very much. Somebody has it says, is it an abuse when you see a threat on your marriage by a third person and you want to gently remind your spouse to limit interaction with the individual?
Not at all. But what we are talking about here is the fact that this is the usual characteristics. Many are just the example the person gave. You have seen a real threat. You have seen certain signs. That is different from even when there is no particular threat at all, you are consistently accusing your partner. A few weeks ago, I saw a case in which this lady was consistently accusing the partner of cheating. Meanwhile, she has not even seen anything at all. She has picked up certain phone numbers from her husband's phone that anytime the husband is holding his phone and he's online, he will go and check the other number if the other number is online. And then the conclusion is that the husband is chatting with that person. So in this case, just for the fact that the husband is online and somebody else is also online means that the husband is chatting with that other person, so they are cheating. That is different from when you have a realistic situation. Many times you even chance upon chats or conversations that are not respecting limits to the person's privacy and all that. And so you want to protect your relationship or your marriage by demanding that. That is actually in place. It is only out of place when there is no evidence at all and there is constant insistence.
Okay, thank you very much. Somebody made a comment, and we'll go on to the next speaker, but I just want to read some of the comments. Someone said some are just plain narcissistic. As a member of the police force, do you give training to other police officers about how to handle victims when they report? And another person said emotional abusers also don't like communicating with their partners, but they only react on issues and not open for random proactive conversation. Why is this so? And these abusers are narcissists who have no love for anyone. People need to read about narcissists in order to be informed when the red flags begin to pop up. Anyway, just for the sake of time, we had Mr. Ewukuba Quinn going next, but I think he logged off briefly. And so I'm going to ask Mrs. Samantha to introduce our next speaker, and we'll get hold of Mr. Adolf for the last presentation. Thank you. And so, Dr. Foster, if you can kindly stop sharing your screen at this point.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, thank you.
Right. So our next speaker is the very Reverend Ama Afoble. She is a Wesley Girls High School all-girl, a 1961 year group. Her credentials include a BSc with a diploma in education, MSc counselor in education, and diploma in theology. The very Reverend Ama Afoble is an educationist and the first woman Director General at the Ghana Education Service. She's also a Reverend Minister of the Methodist Church of Ghana. She's blessed with two daughters who are also all girls of Wesley Girls High School, Dinah, who is in the 1986 year group, and Doris, who's 1987 year group. We are delighted to have her with us, so please join me in welcoming the very Reverend Ama Afoble. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and welcome all the listeners. It is good for you to have invited a BBC like me to join this program and share the little that I know with the up and coming generation. As the introductory remarks said, it looks like abuse is on the increase, either that or the proportion of it, but it's come to mind that this must be addressed and people must be made to be aware so that it does not affect their functioning. As a teacher, I'll just go back to the classroom. It is William Shakespeare said in his play Hamlet that all the world is a stage and all the men and women merely plays. Unfortunately, the stage of life in which we all find ourselves, the script for the plays are written by ourselves. What the socialists will say, life scripts. We write our own life scripts that determine how we behave, how we respond to things, our relationship and everything, based on the way we are raised ourselves, our experiences with our significant others in our lives. All these things, like the Bible says in Proverbs 22:6, train up a child the way in which he should grow, and when he is grown, will not depart from it. All these things don't leave us. Our experiences, the way we are handled, our feelings, and all, perceptions, realities, and all, go in to write this life script that I'm talking about, and everybody has his or her own. So, at most of the time, the way we behave depends on all these things. Some people become abusers because that's all they've witnessed in their lives. And some women also tend to gravitate towards such people because that's what they have seen, that's how they feel. We are all made up of our body and our spirit. When God created us, he created us from the earth and then breathed into us. So we are all spirit beings. So from time to time, our bodies or our inner spirit speak to us. When we are comfortable about situations, they are really red flags telling us that we should move away from that. Now, we need to sensitize the children in our care, people in our lives, as to how they behave and how they respond to things. From very early stage, we must help the children in our care to develop positive self-esteem. It's very, very important how people react or receive things depending on how they feel themselves or how they perceive themselves. So whether it's a high positive esteem or low positive esteem, it all affects us. Then we need to teach people how to make choices early in our lives. Life is full of making choices, and choices have consequences. So we need to learn the skills for making appropriate choices that will help us to develop so that we live and be satisfied with life. Now, very small, but it may sound a bit perhaps inconsequential, but we buy so many dresses, for example, for our children as they are growing up. Now we have to go somewhere. You feel pressured. The child is insisting, this is the dress I want to wear. If you give me the other one, the child is just telling you that I also have the right. I'm trying to express my right. But we as adults will invariably just choose something, throw it at the child. If we won't wear it, then we don't go. All these subtle messages are things that during marital counseling and meeting with young people, I try to tell them to watch out, because we need to teach our children how to choose and be responsible for their choices. We also need to teach them conflict resolution. Nobody is an island. We all live in groups and associate with people. Conflicts are bound to happen. How do we resolve them? Coming from the priesthood angle, there are so many things in the Bible that help us to build our self-esteem. Even the Bible stories, they all help us and gear us towards that. Some of them have been grossly misinterpreted. For example, the story in the Bible saying that if somebody takes your cloak, outer garment, give him the other one too. He wants you to go to 1 mile, go a second mile with the person. We, most of the time growing up, have been taught that it means be very docile as a Christian, if that is your choice. But in actual fact, Jesus was actually teaching us that be assertive. Know how to take control of a situation and turn it around to suit you. You ask me for my garment, the outer garment. You can't wear just that. You need the other one too. So I said, okay, have it. But you must take the second one, the other one, so you can wear it properly. You want me to go 1 mile, so don't worry. I'll go 2 miles, 3 miles with you. You have taken control of the situation. So the person has no power over you again. Just by the way, just an example. The Bible also tells us in Ephesians 4:26 that we should not let the sun set on our anger. Anger destroys us as human beings and may not have any effect actually on the one who even made you angry. You know, somebody defined anger as a self-punishment imposed, you know, for the wrongs of somebody else. The one who made you angry must have just gone away, forgotten about it, and you being angry, punish yourself for an act that the perpetrator himself or herself has just walked away from. All these are things that we need to learn to deal with. Now, let's move away from these developmental, just to tell you that this abuse and all, you know, has a long history. That's why when people feel abused or they suffer the abuse, they need to go for help so that somebody, an independent person, a counselor of some sort, will sit back, listen to the person who has been hurt, and then ask appropriate questions to help the person to work through whatever it is. Counseling is not imposing your will or your solutions on somebody else. What may have worked in one situation may not work in the other. So we just have to take note of that and know that there's a difference between advice and then counseling. When you go for advice, you are the one advising you is telling you that I know better than you, and if you know what is good for you, you will do this and that. I don't know. You have to be empowered yourself so that you can effect a change perhaps in your life script and the way you see things, and be better equipped, not only to solve one situation, but to move on and solve other situations. What one may accept as being abusive may not be an abuse to another. But my main concern actually in abusive situations is where it adversely affects the one who is being abused, to the extent that it may end up with physical abuse and then maim the person or even take the life of the other person. What are some of the signs? You haven't said all these. What are some of the signs of a situation in which, you know, we will describe now as being abusive? The first speaker has spoken about some of these things, but there are people in relationship and that their partners or those they are with look down upon, and they don't let them feel that they are proud of them. They behave as if they are even, let's take a one-to-one relationship. In marriage, for example, or in courtship or anything like that, you'll find that your partner is not proud of you, does not even want to introduce you to anybody. Or in conversations, they are always referring to, oh, when I used to go out with this person, when we were going out, that happened. Always referring to the exes. It's not a good sign. You need to work through it and find out exactly what is going on. Some people they keep scores. They can't forgive. In fact, I've been in an actual counseling situation where the gentleman just said, oh, excuse me for a minute. We sat down waiting. He went into his room and brought a notebook in which he had actually categorized all the offenses, that the so-called offenses that the wife or the partner was supposed to have committed. He sat down, he calls the date, and this day, this is what you did. And I called in, so to where there was an intervention, he had written, I called you so came, said this, that, and I forget you. And then 2. I mean, it's so unhealthy. How can you sleep in the same room with your partner where you have a diary of offenses kept in the room? These are not good signs. They must be worked through. Don't try to push anything under the carpet. You come across a situation, confront it, have it solved. Some don't even put any effort in the relationship. When you are in a relationship, when it looks lopsided, you are the only one trying to get the relationship to work. The other partner is passive. That also is a red flag that you must watch. It should be a two-way street, something that both of you would work at. You'll be in that relationship for quite some time. If it's one-sided, fatigue steps in, then the consequences you can imagine. There are some people who cannot apologize. That's also a very big red flag. Some over-apologize, some also will just not apologize. For that, you note it also as a red flag. You don't commit fully to such a relationship if you detect a thing like this, even in the courtish stages. People who don't even know how to give gifts, meaningful gifts, to their partners. They always think of something that either I'll go back and come and benefit. But if the person really puts a value on you, the person will give you something that you yourself will be happy with. And the partner is happy to see you also happy and appreciate you. It fosters good relationships. Then another red flag is the differences in core values. People marrying or courting each other, you say you are broad-minded across faith, for example. You must know your own values that you've grown up with. What you will be able to tolerate and what you will not be able to tolerate. There is a limit to compromises that people can strike. That one you must also know. So know what you yourself stand for, so that you can identify things that do not go to please you, or things that will later on turn into an abuse that will not be helpful to the relationship. The other speaker also spoke extensively about the possessiveness. Some people are so possessive, insanely possessive. If you love somebody, you must be able to let that person go and trust that that person will not do anything to harm you. Extreme jealousy is a red flag that must be watched. Some people go to the extent of isolating their partners from the loved ones, simply because loved ones know you better. So there is always an attempt by the abuser to separate you from your family members or those who really love you, because they see red flags where perhaps you have not seen and may alert you to that. Some people have a natural tendency to talk down on servants and people they think are below them. That is also a red flag. The person may not only do it to people who you think or you accept as being below, but may apply it also to you. Conflicts are inevitable in any relationship, but when it's too frequent, then it must be addressed. It goes on and it leads to very, very serious family conflict and abuse. People who do not have good relationship with their own family members and with others, always criticizing others, they are always right. Being right in your own eyes is also a red flag. Relationship start from the family or your close relatives. If that is not good, don't think yours will be any better. And such people are often unreliable. Some people are unreliable. You give them time to pick you up, they won't come. Let's meet this time, they won't do this, they will. And all these that are times we overlook are red flags that must be looked at. So, ladies and gentlemen, people listening to us, I think I'll just end here. There are others that will come. The red flags are so many that we cannot cover in just one episode. And I'm glad there'll be others and there'll be time for people to ask questions. So I pray and hope that I have at least thrown light on certain issues that will get people thinking and come up with questions for us to try to think through. Thank you very much for listening.
Oh, Reverend, the very Reverend, thank you so much. This was extremely insightful. You combined your years of counseling, experience, and everything to give us some really, really, really good pointers. People who are unforgiving, who don't show respect, talk about their exes, and put people down. And so I think that you've really touched on some very, very important topics, and we really appreciate you. I would also like to mention at this point that we have a slew of other panelists who joined us, and these include Mr. Adolphe Iwuku, who is going to be speaking next, Dr. Angela Dramana Abuaje, Honorable Diana Dapa, the Deputy Minister for the Ministry of Justice and Defense, Dr. Jifa Tete, Professor Efo Hesse, they're all in the background, and so they'll be willing to take your questions. And so at this point, I'm going to just ask one question, which I believe was directed as Dr. Foster. I would introduce Mr. Adolphe Iwuku, and then we'll take a lot of questions. So one of the questions that came up on our YouTube channel was that, how does one get out of an abusive relationship, especially the self-punishment partner, without the worst happening? And I think the self-punishment partner is the one who acts sad and morose and all that. So I think that's Dr. Foster, and then I'll introduce Mr. Adolphe. Thank you.
So usually, if you realize that you have to get the person to begin to seek for professional intervention, because as it happens like that, they become very much dependent on you, and it is like you are the only person in their life, or so kind of. They can paint that sort of picture to you, and so it gives you even that feeling that if in your absence they cannot be able to survive. But the question is, over the years, you didn't grow up with such a person. So how is it that because you are now in a relationship with a person, then they cannot live their life without you, or they will threaten to take their own life because of a demand that you are not able to meet? So the best thing to do is to converse convince the person, especially if they are dependent on you, to begin to seek for psychological intervention. Once a professional comes in, you'll be able to get more insight into their behavior. Sometimes they do not, just as Reverend mentioned, they may not even be aware of the fact that what they are doing is an abuse. So if you get a professional to come in, a lot of insight will help them to understand how problematic their behavior is. And then you can be able to help each other and liberate each other from the challenges.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of work. It means this person is very, very dependent and cannot see beyond the circle of that relationship. Thank you very much for answering that question. And so there's lots of
can I just add a little bit to what he said?
Certainly.
You know, this happens especially with Christians. They feel you are told in a Christian setting, once you marry, don't divorce. Don't think of walking away. I mean, people feel trapped simply because of their Christian beliefs. It need not be so. When it's really affecting, because when you are being abused, it affects your performance, your happiness, and all those around you. So a counselor may advise, step aside for a while. This person who is behaving like a victim now, that I can't do without you, and step aside for a bit and see whether they will not survive. And if it's really so, you can come together. Nobody is saying that once you feel abused in a way, you walk away from the relationship. No, you can work through it. But at times, so that life will be saved, you separate a bit, seek counseling, both of you, and then gradually come back together.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, the very Reverend Amma Fobley and Dr. Foster, for that answer. I'm sure Mr. Adolf will throw in, and all the panelists will throw in their bit as well. I'm going to introduce Mr. Adolf Awukubekwin is the National Coordinator of the Coalition on Domestic Violence Legislation in Ghana, also known as the DV Coalition. He's also a lecturer in clinical and developmental psychology at the Methodist University College, Ghana. He holds a postgraduate degree in psychology from the University of Ghana, as well as a diploma in transitional justice from the International Center for Transitional Justice and Institute for Justice and Reconciliation, both in Cape Town, South Africa. Mr. Awukubekwin has considerable experience in working with survivors of gender-based violence, having worked for several years as a clinical psychologist and gender-based violence specialist at the Women and Juvenile Units, also known as WAJU, now Domestic Violence and Victims Support Unit of the Ghana Police Service in Accra, as well as the Women's Initiative for Self-Empowerment, also known as WISE. He's worked in the same capacity for the Federation of International Women's Lawyers, or FIDA. He has worked as a trainer in counseling for the Gender Studies and Human Rights Documentation Center's Chin Chin Project, the ARC Foundation Ghana, and the Ghana Police Service. Mr. Awukubekwin served as counselor at the National Reconciliation Commission and Victim Support Volunteer and the Ghana Center for Democratic Development, CDD, working with both victims and alleged perpetrators of the human rights abuse during Ghana's National Reconciliation Exercise, in collaboration with the ARC Foundation Ghana. In collaboration with the ARC Foundation Ghana, he runs the Center for Trauma Relief and Prevention, also known as CTRAP, where he oversees the provision of trauma-informed interventions for survivors of gender-based violence and other traumatic experiences. Adolf is married to Abba, and together they're blessed with 3 lovely boys, Papayao, Kwejo, and Kofi Awukubekwin. And with all this experience, we almost didn't have him because he had a power cut. He was supposed to be our first speaker. I don't know what magic he worked, but he made it. And so we're very welcome. We're very happy to have you here, and please have the floor, and thank you for making all the efforts to join us again. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Ayi, and good evening to you all. Yes, I'm looking at dynamics of unhealthy relationship. We're looking at the red flags from courtship to marriage and beyond. I got a bit fascinated about the beyond, because courtship we know.
I think we lost, did we lose his sound? Mr. Adolf, I'm not sure if you can hear us, but we're not able to hear you.
Just things defines what constitutes domestic relationship, and it comprises all of these categories. Now, unhealthy relationship comes many ways, many forms. But I'm going to focus on domestic violence, which for me is a bit difficult, is worst form of unhealthy relationship. But what constitutes unhealthy relationship, really? For me, fundamentally, it's simple. A relationship that is devoid of trust and mutual respect qualifies as an unhealthy relationship. Yes, it may not necessarily be abusive, but once you are in a healthy relationship, you may be on your way to experiencing abuse. Now, what then is a healthy one, a healthy relationship? Well, in a relationship where you have trust, you have respect, you have honesty, you have expression of individuality, you are validated, you are affirmed, your boundaries are respected, closing from work going home, you are eager to reach home, I will characterize this relationship as a healthy relationship. But in this present day and age, I think that most healthy relationships are under siege from the canker of domestic violence. And so I want to explore domestic violence in some detail. But first, before I even get to defining them, I want to just turn out some statistics for us to know what we are dealing with. The first thing I want to say is, for every 3 Ghanaian women, one of them may have suffered physical abuse from an intimate relationship in the past year. This was as far back as 1999. Now, fast forward, 2016, there was a repeat of this study by the Ministry for Women, Gender, Children, and Social Protection. And the statistics were not different. Now, in that study, the most common form of domestic violence reported by women in the last 12 months included economic violence, that constituted 12%, social violence, psychological violence, physical violence, and sexual violence. Now, for men, the number 1 was psychological violence, followed by social violence, economic violence, physical violence, then sexual violence. Now, when we talk about domestic violence, really, we are talking about a pattern of behavior, a pattern of assaultive behavior that benefits one partner, the one who wields power in that relationship and determines how the relationship should go on. There is an unequal power relationship in that relationship, and almost always it is tilted in favor of the man. So you have majority of victims being women and majority of perpetrators being men. This is not to say to tilt the picture artificially against men. That is the statistics talking. Majority of perpetrators are men. It doesn't mean all men are bad. And of course, all women are good. But statistically speaking, you have most women being victims and most men being perpetrators. Now, age was found to be one of the key determinants of domestic violence in Ghana. So young women and men between 15 to 19 years were substantially more likely to have experienced domestic violence than any other age group. Women aged 15 to 19 were between 1.3 and 4 times more likely to receive any form of domestic violence than of, for instance, women aged 30 to 39. Exposure to violence in childhood was found to be strongly related to the likelihood of an individual being a victim or perpetrator of violence in adulthood. Women who witnessed any form of domestic violence as children were between 1.3 and 3 times more likely to report domestic violence than women who did not witness violence during their childhood. Men who witnessed social, psychological, economic violence in their homes as children were between 1.2 and 2.2 times more likely to have experienced these forms of violence in adulthood than other men. Taken together, these findings suggest that Ghana may experience vicious intergenerational cycles of domestic violence that need to be broken if further progress is to be made in reducing domestic violence. And it is for this reason I find this webinar extremely timely and important, because some way, somehow, at some point, this intergenerational transmission of violence would have to be dealt with. Now, in addition to socioeconomic factors, were found to be among the most important determinants of domestic violence in Ghana. Of course, it just impacted in a very complex way. Now, the interesting thing is low asset levels were found to be strong determinants of psychological and economic violence among women, but high asset values were associated with higher levels of social and sexual violence among men. So if you're a woman and you have less assets, you are more likely to experience violence compared to men. And the men with more assets were also likely to experience psychological violence. Now, tensions and fights over money or property were found to be leading determinants of all forms of domestic violence across all the regions in Ghana. Women with no education were generally between 0.5 and 2.5 times less likely to experience domestic violence than women with some level of education. And for me, with the audience we are interacting with, the most important finding was that more educated men were around 3 times more likely to experience economic or sexual violence than less educated men. This result may be due to the fact that women and men with more education may report. Okay, so the higher education you have for women, it doesn't even protect you from abuse. And as I shared somewhere, my frustration working in this area is women who are highly educated, who have the economic wherewithal to seek help, who experience violence. They are unable to break the shackles. And the reason why they are unable to break the shackles are because of social expectation, social cultural expectation that makes being in a relationship so vital and defining your identity in terms of who you are married to and all that. That served as impediment for women to break out of this violence. Now, there are many forms of domestic violence. We have physical, we have psychological, we have sociocultural, and then we have sexual. I just want to give one instance of abuse. A woman who has suffered repeated abuse from her spouse for many years reached out for help to her family to resolve yet another conflict that had erupted. The family, with the help of 3 pastors from different denominations, called the parties and through mediation attempted to resolve the matter. At the mediation, the woman was made to apologize for her wrongs, and the couple was prayed for and sent home to live happily ever after. Less than 3 months later, the woman was dead. Her body was found at the bottom of an apartment block. It happened right here in Accra. Then somewhere in 2004, I got a medical report, a photocopy of a medical report that a client showed me. Okay, so the finding, what had been written on the medical report was this. On 20th of February 2002, a medical officer's report revealed the following about a 24-year-old victim who reported having been attacked by 4 men, one of them masked, who inserted a metal tube into her vagina after being beaten and given something to drink. These were the items that were discovered. 4 screws length, about 2 inches between from her vagina, several abrasions on the vagina. This lady was unable to pass urine, and so she was cathetered, and she was unable to walk. Another story is about a woman who said, I suffered years of cruelty and controlling behavior at the hands of my husband. He was a respected pastor. When I finally gathered courage to leave him, church officials did nothing to help me. Though I was homeless and penniless, the assumption was that he was blameless as a man of God. It felt so unjust. I tried to confide in another minister, but he accused me of being a neurotic and vindictive woman. The system forces shame and silence onto us, even if we want to speak. Now, these are the experiences of women who experience domestic violence. And there are dire consequences for this. The ultimate is that they die. And relationship doesn't, do not start off being terrible. Oftentimes, at every inception, things are okay. Sort of a grooming process, one may, put it. So you think there is love, jealousy, possessiveness. You define that as love. When you are being monitored, when you are being told you are the center of my life, without you, I can't do anything. I always caution my clients to be very careful about the only you syndrome, the only me syndrome. Oh, you are the only one who understands me. You are the only one who has loved me this way, no one else. The only one I can talk to. When you hear these, you are not God. If you think I am the only one who can make you happy, it is a red flag because there is high expectation for you. And so you cannot guarantee eternal joy, eternal happiness. That is not life. Life is messy, life is complex. There are ambiguities in life. And so for someone to hold you hostage by this high expectation, it puts you in serious, real danger. But what really causes domestic violence? Of course, unequal power relationship. That one thinks that he has power and can do what he pleases, and he will not be held accountable. And that has been our lot, where there is blatant abuse in relationship and everybody keeps quiet. The family, the church, even sometimes state institutions, until the year 2000, from the year 2000 that we got WAJU and subsequently DOCU to be set up. Victims of domestic violence suffered in silence and died undignified life. Nobody cared. Nobody believed them. And why don't we believe them? We don't believe them because we think that, as we say in Akan, you don't wash your dirty linen outside. We think that marriage is extremely important for women. And that even if you're going to contest for a political office and you're not married, I have seen some women being forced to marry before contesting. That is unfair to women. Why must we tie relationship to their identity? It's not as if there is nothing wrong with that. But where they suffer in the same relationship and we look on, we become complicit in that relationship. But one can be trapped in abusive relationships. Sometimes you have wondered, why don't you leave? Why are you staying in abusive relationship? Why do women continue to stay in abusive relationship? Well, there is a pattern, and that pattern becomes a vicious cycle that traps them. As I indicated early on, there could be tension in the relationship. We are angry, we don't talk to each other, you cook, I don't eat. There is tension. You know, I go out, I don't tell you where I'm going. You talk to me, I don't mind you. The more you want to get close to me, the more I distance myself from you. And that is, I think that the emotional blackmail that Dr. Naniwato talks about. But it doesn't stay there. It graduates to an explosion stage where there is assault, where there can be killing, because you can be hit with an implement and you die. You can be shot and you die. That is the explosion stage. And it is often triggered by very flimsy excuses. For instance, why is my food so cold? Or, oh, my dear, why have you kept that long in coming home? Then it leads to an explosion, and a woman is abused to power. At this stage, she may seek refuge from the family or run to the hospital, and it is at that point that what has happened may come out. But where she goes even to the police station to report, you will see that the man will go to VVIPs, people that they both respect, and begin to plead, sending emissaries. I won't do that again. Come again. That transitions the relationship to a honeymoon phase, where you really get excited to meet the man you first married, because you'll be shown genuine love. I have encountered clients who, after they have been beaten physically, are bought plane ticket to travel abroad for vacation. And so the honeymoon phase is where there may be some show of contrition, I'm sorry, I won't do that again. And then you accept. At this stage, they may go to the police station if they have reported and say, we want to withdraw the case and settle at home. We don't want to go, I don't want to prosecute. And then they come back home And after some time, the cycle begins. Now, the cycle doesn't get resolved by itself. It needs external intervention. And many, many homes are going through this, a cycle. So sometimes you wonder, every 6 months there is an explosion and they go through all of that. So you can get trapped in this cycle of abuse. You may die. But we often think that, well, there must be other reasons why this happened beyond unequal power relationship. That may lead us into myths, assumptions, presumptions that are incorrect. So for instance, my spouse is stressed. That is why he assaulted me. If only I didn't provoke him. Hello, that cannot be a cause. We are stressed. Yes, stress, anger may aggravate an already dysfunctional situation, but it is not the cause. The reason it happens is that I think that I can do it to you and nobody dares tell me anything. I'm not accountable. So it breeds impunity in the relationship. Okay, so or there's poverty, or it happens to a certain class of people. Domestic violence is no respecter of educational level, class, or ethnicity. Once the determinants of it are present in your relationship, it will happen to you. Now, I see controlling behavior. The men become so controlling that they are in charge of everything. Interestingly, you see, both have been socialized to play their femininity role and masculinity role very well. So yes, there are some women you hear that is, oh, if he doesn't beat me, then he doesn't like me. Because there is an expectation that as a woman, if I do something, my spouse have the right to correct me. And in some part of this country, the things, the dowry, when the things that are, when you're going to marry, the kind of things you send, one of the items is a cane. Authorizing you that when your wife does something, you can cane the person. Okay, so the social context really, and the social norm really endorse the abuse of women. And we have a responsibility to change that, because the cost here are many. Let me give you an example where so many years back at Dobsu, early morning, Monday, I got a call. And as soon as I picked the call, there was a woman at the other side sobbing uncontrollably early morning. She worked then with one of these banks. Apparently, the Sunday, she was held hostage and held to keep vigil all night. She couldn't sleep. She was harassed, insulted, beaten, and she had to come to work early in the morning. What is going to be the output of this woman who has suffered violence? The indirect cost is so much, and even the direct cost. So economically, we lose out. Economically, we lose out as a nation if we do not address this unhealthy happenings in our relationship. I already mentioned intergenerational transmission. You see, witnessing violence in itself, without necessarily experiencing it, but just witnessing it is very, very serious for children. Of course, there is what we call the adverse childhood experiences, where when you were a child and you experience adverse events, abuse, the number of abuses you suffer, okay, can determine kind of both physical health and mental health conditions you suffer in your adult life. So it is a must that we must address it, and address it with all the seriousness that it deserves. I think for coming last and wanting to manage time, I would want to bring my conversation to an end. And then when there is question time and there are questions, I'll take opportunity to expatiate on many of the things that I've highlighted. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kubekwe. I think we're very pleased that you finally did manage to get your lights back on, so that you could give us. This has been actually, some of it for some of us, it sounds quite harrowing in a way, because it's very strong bits of information that you've given us. And I think I sat here listening, and I think the key things that we hear as professional women is how the expectation that we put on us as a social identity, becomes an impediment. These are things that we're picking up on. And also the intergenerational transmission of violence. I think that's something that I found that I've really taken with me, and I'm sure everyone else who's listened to that. So what we'll do, we don't have lots of time, so it means we're going to have to burst through these questions pretty quickly. So there's one on here which I'm going to quickly ask you, and then Dr. Bertha will also ask you questions. We're just going to have to get as many of these done as possible. Someone says here, thanks, Dr. Aukubekwe. How can we effectively manage conflicts in relationships to strengthen the marriage, to prevent escalations that result in abuse? When is it prudent to seek professional help? How can we fight the stigmatization of seeking help, i.e. washing your dirty linen to a third party? I mean, this is quite complex. So pick what you want out of that, because there's a fair bit to answer.
Well, in relationships, definitely there are bound to be conflict. And I believe that if we are prepared to fight fair in relationship, I mean, peace is not the absence of war. So in a relationship, definitely there will be some conflict. But the two of us must agree that, have a sort of protocol to say that this is how we're going to resolve our conflict. And we must all respect that. Okay, we must all respect that. So I think that one of the things that while you are in courtship, you should be talking about is what kind of conflict resolution protocol as a couple you are going to put in place, that you're going to, respect. So for instance, if there is a conflict, both of you must agree that as soon as we are unable to resolve this, we mustn't be shy about going to see a professional, somebody who can help us address that issue. It's very important. It shouldn't be as if we are washing our dirty linen outside. Now, there is a Akan proverb. If cancer, with all its problem, doesn't feel shy to show up on your nose, you also don't feel shy to put medicine on it. Okay, so if conflict emerges, we must treat that conflict with all the seriousness it deserves, so that we can, manage it and not allow it to escalate. Now, you cannot stretch your hands more than the balls in them. Sometimes we say that you don't stand in the column of ants to pick them out when you are bitten by them. You step aside, and stepping aside means going to see a professional or going to see somebody you both trust. That must be part of the relationship.
Mr. Adolf, thank you very much for that answer. And I'm not sure why I'm echoing. I have two thumbs up for you. One says, thank you, Uncle Adolf, for the very examples that lead to the death of many women in the name of the church and family pressures. And somebody also said, brilliant. And it says, brilliant, Mr. Ewukuba Queen. And so thank you for that presentation. I have 3 sets of questions in the Q&A, and I think those are directed at the very Reverend Ama Afoble. So I'll put them all together, and my co-moderator would handle some of the questions in the chat. So Reverend Blaze, so here are your questions. It says, Reverend, please, is it God who calls 2 people to marry? Or is it the would-be couple who decide to marry and call God to witness their marriage? So that's one. Secondly, why is the church adamant to advise people in abusive marriages to run to safety after one of the spouses has reported until the abuse leads to the sudden death of the spouse? I'm not sure I even understand. It says, why does the church adamant to advise people? It seems it's a conflicting question. Why does the church advise people in abusive marriages to run to safety after one of the spouses has reported until the abuse leads to the sudden death of the spouse through physical abuse? It's almost as if it should say, why should the church advise people to stay until one person has died? Okay. Third question, what can the church do differently through their counseling sessions to save lives of spouses, especially women in abusive marriages? And maybe my spin that I want to ask Reverend is that she mentioned that in Christianity or in the Christian circles, it's been said that divorce is wrong. And so when people feel trapped, they feel they still need to stay. So are you saying then that as a Christian, it's okay to divorce if you feel the relationship you're in is abusive? And the fourth one, also to the Reverend, is please, can the church be sued for discriminating against a woman who walks out of a 20-year-old married to a sterile man, leaves property, acquiring together to the man, and the church sees the woman as disgracing the church? So that's a lot of questions for Reverend Ama Afoble. Thank you.
I hope I can get it all, but if I don't get you, prompt me. You see, we are creatures of love, and we want to be loved. That aspect God put to us, but God did not also create us as robots. We decide. That's why I said decision-making skills are very important. We decide the people we want to go along with and be in a permanent relationship. So in the marriage ceremony itself, you hear that it said that the 2 people have agreed to be bound in the matrimony. So it's a decision that is taken, not by the church, by people, but who bring it to the church for the church's blessing. Most ministers are not trained as counselors. Even in the Orthodox Church, where a bit of counseling is incorporated in their training, personally, I don't think it's enough. And we are all very judgmental by nature. And we don't want to look at things objectively. Everybody wants to be on the safe side. No. But we need to look at things objectively. That's what I always tell the church to do. Even within the church itself, the ministers themselves, I keep hammering, have a proper setup, counseling unit set up to deal with marital issues from the masses. These conflicts are even happening between reverend ministers. At times, and another thing I tell them, it's a bit difficult at times to go to a Christian brother or sister even for, not for, at times how funny you've been able to talk to somebody. But the next minute you go to a prayer meeting, the conversation you've had with another believer becomes a topic for prayer. Then everybody starts, hey, what is happening? What is happening? Before you are aware, whatever you discuss with a Christian brother or sister in secret is all over the place. That is also another danger. The person you are talking to, you don't even know exactly the situation in which the person is coming from. And society is so judgmental. See, some of these issues are very personal, because when you are unhappy, it affects your health, your performance, everything. On the other hand, let me say that the church also offers some relief for people who are in abusive society relationship. You go to your Bible meetings, your Christ Club band or whatever it is, and your mind is taken off whatever is happening to you. And if you're a prayerful person, you pray about it, and at times the solution would come. They, as I said, some people feel they are not going to even sit you down and talk with you because they don't want to be responsible for the breakup in somebody else's marriage. But you know what? One big thing I will say is that conflicts are good for a relationship because it helps the relationship to grow. It helps the love to grow. You know the likes and dislikes of each other. A bone, when it's broken, is strongest at the point of the fracture when it heals. No bone will break twice at the same spot where there had been a fracture before and it had healed. It so goes for a relationship. That's why I say sometimes conflicts are good in a relationship, so that we help to cement the relationship. Also, we must also bear in mind also all the time that relationship is a long-term thing, and it must involve negotiations and renegotiations and whatever. You never stop. If you do not have the temperament for that, then you will leave all the relationships that you ever come in. The church says that in the church's thing is that when you get divorced, don't marry again. Because you were not able to make a success of the first one, there's always a way to resolve conflicts, which perhaps were not done. But I keep saying that every situation is peculiar and must be handled on its own. When you are marrying somebody who has been divorced before, you have to ask a lot of questions. Because if it is a pattern in the life of whoever, then it's going to rear its head again. The questions were so many, I don't think I was able to jot all of them down, but I think I have covered some of them. If not, remind me and I'll talk about
Reverend, thank you. It says, is it God who calls two people to marry, or is it the would-be couple who decide to marry and call God to witness their marriage? And
the people decide themselves to marry and then call God to come in. That's where the values come in. If you marry somebody with a like mind who share similar, during the courtship stage, all these things must be clarified. And these are skills that you build over time, right from childhood. You build all those things, so you are able to discern. But at times, it's so important, especially for us women. Oh, we must get married. You get to a certain age. If you don't marry, you won't get a husband, and you won't be able to have a child. And all these pressures are there. But don't let's blame everything on God. God has given us the intellect to think. God has given us the inner spirit to prompt us when danger is around. We must learn to listen to our inner self. If we do that, we can avoid some of these things. No two relationships are perfect in this world. So don't ever, if you have a wrongful expectation, don't expect to be in a perfect relationship. It's a human institution. That's why you have to negotiate and renegotiate all the time. And two people coming from two different backgrounds. Don't forget about the little bit I told you about scripts. They are all very, very important. And that's why trained counselors are also important to help people to work through these. We shouldn't get ourselves trapped that once you go to a counselor, it means that your marriage is over. No. You don't at times even have to wait till there's a conflict as such. The counselor can help you. We've had people that in the middle of our negotiations, they themselves realize the answers they need, and sessions are cut short. So thank you.
All right, Reverend, thank you very much. It seems we have many questions, and I'd like to tell everyone that we were supposed to end exactly in about 12 minutes. However, I noticed that because of some technical issues, we started about 10 minutes after time, and we also allowed a few questions in between. So instead of ending in 11 minutes, we'll be ending in 26 minutes, which is at 8:15 GMT. And at 3:15 our Central Time and 4:15 on East Coast time. So kindly bear with us so that we can answer a lot of your questions. Some of the things that Reverend said, conflicts are good for a relationship. That's powerful. It allows a relationship to grow. And she said a long-term relationship is going to require negotiation, renegotiation, the whole length of the relationship. So if you're not ready to do renegotiation and negotiation, you'll keep jumping from one relationship to the other. And if you're going to marry a divorcee, ask questions so that if there's a pattern, you don't, and maybe that's why people have been married once or twice tend to remarry over and over and over again. Anyway, so thank you for these questions and thank you for answering them. There were a few things about Bible and Reverend ministers and counseling, but I think we have a lot of questions in the chat. And so I'll allow my co-moderator, Mrs. Samantha Prosher, to pick up some of the questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Bertha, and thank you so much, Reverend Ama Afobule. We really appreciate all this information that you're giving us. So the other question that I can see on here, someone says, is it, I need to be sure that we haven't answered this already. So is it an abuse when you see a threat on your marriage by a third person and you want to gently remind your spouse to limit interaction with the individual?
Samantha, I think that was actually answered. And Dr. Foster said that if there's a real threat and it's not a pattern, and then they can address it. But if it's a pattern of constantly being suspicious, then that is a concern.
Okay, good. Right. So I think I'm going to try as much as possible because I think we've kind of cut through the questions in different directions. So let's try this one. And if we've tried this one, it says emotional abusers don't like communicating with their partners, but they only react on issues and not open and are not open sometimes and are not open for random proactive conversations. Why is this? Dr. Foster, I think we haven't heard from you for a while, so perhaps you can answer that for us, please. Thank you.
All right. As I've said, and then Mr. Adolfo Queen have also said, there is always the desire for power and control by the abuser. So any situation within the relationship that will indicate the abuser losing their power and control, they will always fight it. So they would always be the one who would seem to be on top they are the ones who have the demand. They are the ones who will be putting up the humiliating attitude towards the other person. They are the ones who will be accusing and blaming, and they are not ready to listen to the other person or put themselves in the shoes of the other person. So it's much more has to do with that power and control that they have always wished for and usually would want to use to control the other person or be in charge of the other person. That will make them not be willing to be ready to have proactive conversations, but rather be more reactive in all situations.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I'm going to try as much as possible to get through as many of these questions. Now, there's one here which I'm sort of wondering whether Mr. Bekwe has kind of answered in a way. It says, does a woman's higher academic achievement need to give a special respect to her in a relationship? I think what they're trying to say is that because of her higher education, does she need to be given special respect to her in a relationship?
I think anything beyond us, apart from our intrinsic value as human beings, shouldn't confer any entitlement in terms of respect and what have you. Everybody needs to be respected, whether they've gone to school, they haven't gone to school, whether they have access, they don't have access. The fact that they are created in the image of God, there mustn't be any condition on how the worth of a human being. So we must avoid conditions of worth. Okay, so your education must not confer any special treatment on you, apart from the fact that you are a human being deserving respect. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So I'll do sort of one more and then I'll pass it on to Dr. Bertha to have a go. So how does a partner get an abuser to seek help? I think this is quite important because you're potentially the one living with them. So how does a partner get an abuser to seek help? And he says, in our part, is the world suggesting it's taken as saying he or she is mad? Sometimes the questions may not, but I think what he's trying to say here is, so how do you get, let's go with, how do you get an abuser to seek help? So that it doesn't seem as if the person is mad, because that's kind of how it's viewed, but actually we know they're not. So how do you get them to seek help?
Well, I think the next webinar will fully address seeking help. So if we may shelve this for the next webinar so that we can fully address it,
Perfect.
it will be, yes, it will be very, very useful.
Perfect,
yes.
Perfect. I'm with you. Anything that's a statement, anything, because people are adding all sorts of information on here saying, look, training healthcare workers to identify signs of domestic violence so that they can encourage victims to seek help. Referral systems to places of help would also be very helpful. I think these are good, and they're additional bits of information that are great. I think we've talked about managing conflict, right. And then there are statements on here. So to put your sanity, your health, and your life above societal expectations. Don't put up appearances and die slowly. Your life matters, so choose life. Marriage will neither take you to heaven nor complete you. Wow, I think this is someone who's seriously put pretty much everything that's come from Reverend Effobley, Amma Effobley, and yourself and Dr. Foster almost together in one sentence. I think that's quite profound. Dr. Bertha, I'm going to hand over to you so that you can have.
Thank you. And thankfully, we still have about 18 minutes, so we could take a few more questions. There's one here that says, we are talking about domestic abuse. It's in the Q&A and there's one in the chat, so I'll fuse them. It says, we're talking about domestic violence, abuse against women. How can a woman, quote unquote, the victim, negotiate with the perpetrator? The key is that she has to stay alive. in that case, why is she criticized for being divorced by society and the church? And is it okay to have a best friend who is of the opposite sex while in a relationship? And this other one in the chat room says, thanks, Reverend, for a very insightful presentation. Do you think some of the abuses mentioned are being inflicted on the receiver without the quote unquote abuser or aggressor being aware of what they're doing due to differences in upbringing? And how do you speak up without wreaking havoc on the marriage? How do you reconcile submission with speaking up when somebody is being abused? Because I know, you know, during the rehearsal yesterday, we're talking about somebody speaks up and it's taken to mean you're not being submissive. And so that leads to more punishment. So how do you reconcile speaking up, being submissive, and also the victim negotiating with the perpetrator? I know I've kind of made it complex, but.
Well, can I take a go at it?
Yeah.
The submission bit. I think honestly that speaking up is submission. No, because when you're speaking up, it means that you are submitted to the goals of the relationship. Okay, so when you speak up in a relationship, it is somebody who is submitted to the goals of the relationship, the vision of the relationship, who speak up because he or she doesn't want it to break. If you speak up, you don't want the relationship to break. And so you are submitted to the relationship and not to the whim and caprices of individual partners. The collective goal of the relationship is so important to you that you will speak up rather than let the relationship break. Okay, and why would anybody have trouble if your spouse speaks up? You know, if you do not have the ability to discern what is really going to disintegrate the relationship, and are fortunate enough to have a spouse who is perceptive enough to point to where the flags are and the dangers are, why would you want to respond with bloated ego? So speaking up for me, and submission, they are not mutually exclusive. They are not mutually exclusive. Society wouldn't want a woman to speak up because there is stigma. You feel that you'll be stigmatized. It is better to speak up than to die, because every day you stop speaking up, you die a little. And you don't want that to happen to you. If something must be spoken about, no, there are better ways to speak about them. In respect, yes. Sometimes if you are reactionary, you lose the message. It is how the message is spoken that the abuser latches on. But if you are very respectful in the way you address and not missing the ball, focusing on the issue and addressing the issue, I don't think a man who says, or a woman who says he or she loves you would have to take offense.
Doctor, let me just add a little bit on to what has just been said. At times, we don't know how to address issues. You are the one who is feeling the offense that you think you are being abused. You have to put it in such a way that you don't further offend the offender. Don't go in accusing. You know, it's a skill we must learn. Don't go in accusing. When you do this, that, it makes me feel this way, that way. Better than saying, hey, you do this and you do that. Always accusing. What is your responsibility in the whole process? And you are also dealing with yourself. You are feeling whatever it is and not the other person. So you try not to project it onto the other person. So it's like you are saying, this is my cry to you, this is the way I feel, help me to feel better. And if both of you are really committed to the relationship, oh, I'm sure your partner will listen. But we like the you too much. Bring the focus onto yourself and the way you feel. Address the way you feel and not project it. That also helps. And it takes a lot of courage, I must admit, for people to come up and speak up. You must be somebody who, regardless of education, you know what you want in life and you know what you stand for. And you are not prepared to let anybody who does not, promote your cause, because you only have one life, to put unnecessary obstacles in your way by way of societal pressure or whatever. Let me tell you, in time, people forget. And they even start admiring the courage of the one who was able to speak up.
Okay, thank you. I had a question that came up on WhatsApp, and we'll come to other questions. It says, most of the discussion has talked about women being abused. Is there any example of men being abused? The discussion is more in the Ghanaian context, but when people travel and leave the country, the context changes. And some women can be very abusive economically, sexually, and emotionally. Can you address that? And I know this question came up even before the webinar. I had a lot of men sending me messages that, is this going to address men getting abused? So if you can spotlight that, that would be helpful.
Well, I think we admitted the fact that, yes, men are abused. Men can be victimized in a relationship. And yes, when you cross a border, the dynamics will change. And many Ghanaian immigrants I know have reverse dynamics. Okay, when the men are in Ghana, they are so powerful. When they go out, because of the social norms outside, there is some dynamic that change that put the men on edge. But the point is this: do unto others what you want them to do to you. It's simple. What you're doing to your spouse, is it fair? Would you want it done to you? Okay, so men are victims, but we must also be very careful here not to bring artificial equalization. We must encourage men to report, and there must be intervention for men who report. Okay, but the numbers we are looking at in this country is that many, many more women are the victim. And so we must be fair to the numbers as well. As we encourage men to report, we must also not pretend that all of a sudden men are the ones who are being abused more than women. And the reason is simple. Even in victimization, men have more access to help than women, because the odds are against women. And so we must increase access to help for women, whilst we encourage men to report and address the concern that men have.
Okay, I'll let Samantha take a couple of questions, but there's one here in the Q&A which I find relevant. Is talking about respect, and I'm bringing it up because I know that almost all the freedom fighters, from Nelson Mandela to Reverend Martin Luther King to Kwame Nkrumah, there's something that education does to you. Most of the African leaders who fought for independence, they were able to do it after a certain level of education. Education opens your mind. So Pat Boedu Dako is asking, may we define what is respect here? There's so many connotations of this word in our culture. The bit about respecting an educated woman may be complicated. Education most of the time comes with a raising of awareness. For example, A woman who is educated may be able to help with budgeting at home, knowing what subjects to choose for the children. And if the husband insists on, I'm the head of the house, backed by the church and the elders and family members, whom can the woman go to, from whom they can go to? I think this kind of respect is a bit questionable. So I don't know if you can talk a little bit about that. And then there's also two questions. It says, can a husband be sued for intercepting the application letter of a master's holding wife in order to avoid competition from the wife at the workplace? And also, what can a wife do to a husband who has threatened to cripple her if she makes any attempt to go further her education?
So
okay.
It happens. Can I just pitch this in?
okay.
It happens that some men are afraid of competition. In fact, personally, I have counseled a couple in a premarital counseling that eventually they decided to call the marriage off. Why? The woman has a vision, because I always want them to talk about their vision for the relationship and how they want to see themselves long-term, short-term, long-term. And the lady had ambition to progress further, and that became a huge argument. And the man made a categorical statement: you marry me, forget about further schooling. I'm capable of looking after you. You know, and therefore, some do forget that at times being the best that you are, you are the best that you can be, is self-fulfilling for your partner also, who is also an individual. And in this world, we don't know who will go first. The wife must always, or whoever is left behind must always be in a position to be able to carry on the family matters. In the same way, a man encouraging the wife, saw the potential in the wife and was encouraging the wife to further her education, came in for counseling that suddenly my husband thinks I'm not adequate and that I should go to school. You know, and then the husband came in and said, madam, this is nothing. I see her other mates and I know where they are and I know the potential of my wife. And I want my wife to be able to cater for the family should anything happen to me. So eventually she accepted, though, through a lot of intervention, she accepted to go back to school, did her first degree. As for some time, I didn't hear of them. I inquired, and the husband told me, "Yo, thank you. So, I shared with you, or a master's." After the first degree, she didn't stop there. She realized that, you know, oh, there's so much more in me, and went further to do her master's. I wouldn't be surprised if she's even done her PhD by now. The courage, the man saw the potential and wanted to give the wife the support and everything. Look, I will look after you. I'll do everything for you, but better yourself. She was afraid the marriage will collapse. So all these are issues that are there, you know, and we must learn to accept ourselves as individuals, develop ourselves for our own personal satisfaction. It's very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I'm keeping a very close eye on time, and I'm very conscious of this. So I tell you what we're going to promise is, seeing that this is a 3-week seminar, I mean 3 weeks, 3 sessions in this series, some of these questions that don't get picked up, we will absorb some of them and bring them up. We will actually pull them out and then bring them up in the next session as well. But we'll do our absolute best to cover as much. I think there are probably a few more. Some of them are statements. There's some here that are statements. So I think I really feel that we need to look more at the questions, things that, so what are the coping skills? Okay, so someone says, so violence, abuse involve power and control, intimidation, inequality, not common household conflicts. I think that came from Dr. Angela Dramina Abuaji to us. And she says, and someone says here, what are the coping skills in such a situation? But I think some of these are help things, which I think we will try and tackle next week, please. So do come back and have a listen. Please, is having children with a woman you're not married to is it a form of abuse? And especially if he's not committed to taking care of the children? If so, how do you report it and what do you do? That's quite an interesting one. Dr. Foster, I'm going to throw that one at you. Did you hear the question? Should I try it again, or are you all right?
Yes, I'm all right.
Okay.
Yes. So there are, what's important is that there are certain prescriptions within the law in
Okay. I think we're having difficulty. I think that we're going to have difficulty with this.
Without marriage. Yes, is it better now?
It's better now. Yeah, thank you.
All right. So as I was saying, yes, according to the law, what's important is that when you have a child with someone, you have the responsibility of partaking in providing the basic necessities and all other things, including shelter, welfare, health, education, and all that. Yes, so it is an abuse.
Dr. Foster.
If you
Dr.
in
Foster.
terms of what.
Dr. Foster, can you hear me? I think your connection. Your connection is quite poor, which I think either do we pass this question on? I think everything else, Dr. Bertha, I think all I can see is a fair number of statements as opposed to questions. So either we pass that question on to another. I mean, I don't know. How does it sound now? Can you speak again? Let's see whether you're.
All right. Yes.
Okay, that seems better.
All right. So I was saying that if you fail to perform your responsibilities towards your spouse or your children, it's a form of an abuse. These are forms of abuses. Neglect is a form of abuse, and the law prescribes certain things you can do and how you can be held accountable for your behavior in not providing for the children. Now, there can also be situations in which one partner, especially in our part of the world, where it is expected that the male is supposed to perform certain rights or pay dowry and perform marital rights over in order to make sure that there is a legal relationship or there's marriage. And so there are times that the man can use that as a way, as a tool against their partner, that I will not pay your dowry, or I will not go forward to your parents because of this and that. If you do this for me, there can be conditions. If you behave in this way, or if you stop seeing the friends I said you should stop seeing, or if you stop working and become a full housewife, then I will with time, I will be able to, or I will perform these rights for you. So sometimes even they can use the marital rights or holding on to performing the rights as a leverage and use it to manipulate their partner, especially the female, to perform or undertake behaviors that they don't wish to do. But the other side is that if you have a child with a person, according to the law, it's within your responsibility to provide the necessities, including education, welfare, food, and all that for the child or for the children. And one other thing that we must know is that it is the responsibility of both parents. Even though in the traditional rights, we may say that the man is the one who is responsible, but within the laws of Ghana, the Children's Act and all other acts, it is within the responsibility of both parents to provide the necessities for the children. It is only when there is that situation or condition in which a partner, especially the man, asks the woman not to work, and that he is qualified enough or he is resourced enough to be able to provide for them, and then he is failing to provide for them, or he's using other conditions that because the woman is misbehaving in quotes, so he's not going to provide for them. There are situations like that. You will see a man living with the family, with the woman, and then maybe because he has bought a few things for the woman to be selling, he thinks that is enough to take care of the family, and so his salary doesn't come home anymore, and nobody knows what he uses the salary for. Yes, there are these things within the law, and the Social Welfare Department is one institution that can be resorted to, and the Domestic Violence and Victim Support Unit of the Police Service is also another institution that persons going through such experiences can go to. Interestingly, emotional abuses, which many times may not leave any physical marks on the individual, are aspects that are mostly ignored and may not even be given any sort of recognition as important or necessary. Meanwhile, these can result in serious mental health implications or even death for any of the partners who is going through these. But then, as at the moment, I'm aware that the police, because of the various psychologists, support that they get, are able to get such couples assessed and then reports given to the police to assist the woman to seek for redress, either in the court or any other quarter that they can be able to access help from.
Okay, so thank you very much. I think as we have seen, this has been such an interesting evening for us, or certainly for those of us. It's evening for is probably afternoon for those of you in the US. But we are going to have to bring our first webinar in this series to an end. And with this focus on red flags, we're sure that it's been a real eye opener. Of that, I don't doubt that for many of us. The Q&A as well has also been invaluable, really, in showing us the reality of being in an unhealthy relationship. It's slightly, for some, might be disappointed that we didn't manage to get to all the questions, but I can assure you, all we're going to do is we're going to pull all these questions. Please do come back, because when you do, we will tackle these, because some of them actually fall into the session 2. So we will pull those out. The speakers have touched on some crucial signs that we need to look out for. Some of them may be obvious, they may seem very obvious, and many are not. Our hope is that we are now in a better position to recognize the signs. whether it's happening to us or it's happening to somebody that's close enough to us, and know that something has to be done. And most importantly, we need to know that help is out there. Okay, now we also know that this sensitive topic may be difficult for some, and could also be a trigger for others. Okay, so should you need some help, please contact the Domestic Violence and Victim Support Unit, DOVSU, which is part of the Ghana Police Service, and Dr. Foster just mentioned them. The unit provides support and protection for victims of domestic abuse by interrelating activities with the Department of Social Welfare, International Federation of Women Lawyers, and Legal Aid Board. Okay, so you can also reach out to the ARC Foundation. They're based in Hachu, and the number is 024-377-7773. Again, we'll provide, this is information we'll be repeating over the next 2 sessions. Okay, so we have 2 more sessions to go, next Sunday 18th of July and the following Sunday 25th of July. Next week, we'll be building on today's session to move on to the next phase, which is to discuss how to seek help in an unhealthy relationship. We're looking forward to welcoming our other speakers, Honorable Diana Sunaba Dapa, who's the Deputy Minister, Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Justice in Ghana, Dr. Angela Dramina Abuaji, who's a lawyer, pastor, and a counselor, and the return of Mr. Adolphe Awuku-Bekwe. So it now leaves me to say a huge thank you, even though I'm sorry we've overrun, a huge thank you to our wonderful speakers, Mr. Adolphe Awuku-Bekwe, the very Reverend Ama Afoble, and Dr. Foster Naniwato, who have carefully, and I say carefully, navigated us through this topic with the sensitivity that it requires. We're extremely grateful to you for giving us your time. Thank you to the Wesley Girls High School All Girls Association for supporting this webinar series, and especially to the webinar committee, and in particular, Amma Engman, Anoa Brew, Dr. Hannah Ayete, Annie Gifty Emisa, Irabna Akiwumi, and Sheila Arthur. And finally, a huge thank you to you, our audience, for taking time out of your Sunday to join us. We really hope you found this session helpful, and therefore will return for the next 2 Sundays. We look forward to seeing you next Sunday, same time, same place. Thank you. Dr. Ayi, if you have a last word.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all very much for the 180 something people who tuned in by Zoom and the 40 something people who watched on YouTube. We're very grateful that you joined us. Kindly share the link, and we would see you next week. And for panelists, please rejoin in a few minutes and let's just regroup. Thank you all so much.